Autism, texture aversion, and a strong need for routine. Are these obstacles enough to stand in the way of going vegan? It's an interesting topic, and one that people often shy away from. But today on the Seitanist Podcast, I'm joined by Dana Andersen, who claims that her autism actually helped her to go vegan. We'll talk about how it helped her, some of the misconceptions surrounding autism, and veganism in general. Of course, this is one person. It doesn't mean that all autistic people are the same, but I think it's an incredibly important topic to talk about nonetheless. I'd really recommend listening to the end. This is not an episode you're going to want to miss. And lastly, if you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to smack that like button like you'd smack a Kit Kat wrapper out of a baby's hand. Now let's get into it. Could you explain autism, and specifically your form of autism, for someone who is maybe neurotypical and doesn't really know much about it?
Autism is a neurodiversity, meaning that it's a slightly different brain that we've got. Essentially, we think a little bit differently, process things a little bit differently. The most common things to come along with autism is generally social issues. So most of us aren't the best at picking up on cues and the like, and a lot of sensory issues and differences as well. But it really affects everything about you in some ways and not at all in others.
And what about for you personally? I know there are many different forms of autism, right?
There's a lot of chat at the minute about what types of words are the best really for autism. So I would say personally, just autistic. That's my label.
Okay.
Because high and low functioning isn't the best of labels to use really at the minute or ever.
Yeah, I can see how that might be hurtful.
Yeah, it separates the autistic community towards like these ones are better than others when we're all the same really. We've just got different difficulties.
Yeah, exactly. Just people, right? So some people, now I don't think this, but some people refer to autism as a disability or an illness. What are your thoughts on that?
I would not for a minute call it an illness. It's not something we need a cure for. It's not dangerous. It's not going to hurt you. But I do personally call it a disability just because society that we live in is formed for neurotypical people, and when you've got a difference in your brain and how you think, it doesn't cater to you the same way that it does for everyone else. So society can feel like it's disabling to us more so than we're disabled, but we're living in a society that means that's us, that we're the disabled ones.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. So what are some of these ways? A
lot of my things are very sensory and socially affected. So like how you'd probably just pop to the grocery store and buy the things you need. That's a whole event for me. I'm prepping for like 2 hours. I've got earbuds that help to like filter out noise because I can't handle all the sounds in shops. I can hear lights buzzing. I can hear nearly all the time. It's really horrible, honestly. But there's little things you can do to deal with it and the like. It's not the worst thing. But even just the banter that you'd have with like the person at the grocery store, that I will freeze. I don't know what to say. I'm just like, you made a joke.
It's like anxiety type of thing.
They're very comorbid a lot of the time. Most autistic people experience anxiety at some point because we don't know how to socialize. We miss the cues that other people leave, so it becomes awkward, and then you're just like, oh my God, this is all my fault.
So how do you learn that kind of thing?
It's a lot of just trial and error and putting yourself in situations that you really, really hate and then being like, oh, I'm not doing that again. And then you have to do it again anyway. So eventually you get used to it.
I feel like autism isn't something that people like to talk about very much. Is that true in your experience?
Yeah. And especially like being a woman with autism, I've so often been told like, oh, well, you don't look autistic and you don't sound autistic. And that's the thing. A lot of us do sort of just get shoved to the wayside because we're not a white man with glasses that likes trains.
Okay, yeah. Oh, they've got a certain image of what autism is.
A lot of people like the stereotype, like you'll be into transport or maths or science and that's it, when there's so much more to us. We're still fully rounded people. We just think a little bit differently.
Yeah. That was actually going to be my next question. Is there anything that you wish people would stop saying to autistic people?
There's 1,000 billion things. The main ones do come around when you're letting people know that you're autistic and you get all, oh, but you don't look, sound, smell, seem autistic. And it's like, well, yeah, we're all people still. There's also, you get a lot of like, oh, well, you're not like the other autistic people. You're like,
oh yeah.
Because I think, especially Americans seem to think that an autistic person's automatically like non-verbal and just can't communicate in any way and can't process what's happening around them. And again, we're all different. Some people will be like that, and they're no less valid, obviously. But it's a lot of things like that. If you're not what people expect of autism, they say some really hurtful things that they think are compliments. it's so rude to the community. It's like, sure, it might not be personally offensive to me, but the community is so wide and so diverse that it's just really rude.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so they're not trying to be rude, but they just don't know what to say, I
Yeah,
guess.
there's just a huge misunderstanding about it a lot of the time, and it sucks when I'm then having to like educate someone in Morrison's, but if someone's got it.
Yeah. That's why I like what you do. You normalize autism. You make it okay for people to talk about
That's
it,
what
right?
I'm aiming for, because it's just so difficult to bring it up with other people, and especially when you're trying to make friends and the like online, like a lot of us are doing with the pandemic and everything. It's really difficult to be like, I know I've made this situation awkward. I know that I'm really anxious and you might be too, but I need to disclose this thing, and you just don't know what kind of reaction you're gonna get.
What is the most common reaction?
Oh, I wouldn't have thought it. I wouldn't have known you were autistic.
Yeah.
Most of that's just that I'm not a man, I think. It's so like male expected.
I'm surprised that I didn't think of that sort of angle.
Yeah.
You know, it's not less common for women to be autistic, right? It's just that society expects fewer women.
Medically,
is that right?
There are less women that are autistic, but it's case of how many have gone undiagnosed because it's easier for us to hide and to mask to society. I think it's probably even really, and there's just not been as many diagnosed.
Yeah, that could be the case. I know it's not. It's an area we've only just started looking into scientifically, I think.
Massive.
And there's a lot of talk about everybody is on the spectrum somewhere. Is that right?
No.
No? Okay, yes. Yeah, so I saw you cringe then. What did I do?
I think a lot of people say, like, oh, well, we're all on the spectrum, to try and be like, oh, well, you're not different. You're still one of us. And I appreciate the sentiment.
Oh, okay.
But if we were all on the spectrum, then the world would be catering to me, essentially. It would be catering to sensory issues and sensory difficulties and social difficulties. It'd be catering to all of that if we were all a little bit on the spectrum. But we're not. That's why I'm labelled autistic and other people are labelled neurotypical.
Yeah, fair play. Okay.
Some autistic traits do play into like a lot of other disabilities and a lot of other neurodifferences and a lot of mental health issues as well. So it is a case of like, you may well have the same trait that I have that's an autistic trait for me, but it's not the same.
Okay, I see what you mean. Okay, well, thanks for educating me. So let's talk about veganism. I know you're a vegan, and in one of your videos, which is how I found you, you said that autism actually helped you to go vegan. Could you explain a bit about that?
I've always had a lot of sensory issues when it comes to foods. So I'd have a lot of safe foods, and the vast majority of them were vegan anyway. I think it was only scrambled egg that was like a massive comfort food to me that wasn't vegan. And then it was mostly when I became an adult really and started having to buy my own food and wasn't necessarily getting like the quality of meat that my parents would buy. Anytime I got like a little bit of gristle, that's the whole meal ruined. If there was like a little bit too much fat on the bacon, that's the whole meal just ruined for me. Like
it's not just like cut it off.
No,
it's done.
I'm not eating again after that for at least a few hours. So it was a case of like, I can either keep going hungry and wasting food because I don't like the way that it tastes or the way that it feels or this or that, or I could just not be eating meat and then I wouldn't be dealing with that. And I did a lot of research into veganism for like the moral reasons and health reasons and blah, blah, blah. But it was mostly like, I think my life's just going to be a lot easier if I stopped doing this to myself.
Yeah. And so with going vegan, there's a big shift in your diet. And because you had these safe meals before and these aversions to certain textures, what was the experience like of trying all these different foods?
Largely, it was really, really positive. I still can't do any of like, when they tell you it's like a sausage or a burger and then it's just a load of like mashed potato and sweet corn. I still can't handle that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But fake meat, like real fake meat, to me, that's what meat should be. Like, I don't want gristle and fat and like weird stuff in there. I just want it to be a slab of fake meat, essentially. It's just the flavor's consistent, the texture's consistent. It's all, I know what I'm getting. There's no surprise there.
Okay, that's very positive. So did you go vegan like overnight or was there a process?
I'd tried a couple of times because I got really into the YouTube videos of like Freely Banana Girl and all these raw till four. So that was my idea of veganism. So every time I tried, I'd nail it for like 2 days and I'd be like, God, I just want a hot meal. I just want KFC or something, like it was ridiculous. So I tried a few times. And then once I realized like, well, if I just binned off meat, I'd be a lot happier. And then I was like, well, there's no point binning that off, but not also getting rid of dairy then, is there? So it was overnight at that point, and there was still a good part of me that thought like, this isn't gonna work. It's gonna be 3 days until I'm like having a Big Mac again. And it's been nearly 4 years now, so it really did work.
Oh wow, that's amazing. Well done. And so you started because it would would help you with this texture
Yeah.
aversion. But because you were researching, you picked up on the animal rights side of things.
I think it's quite common for autistic people because we don't know what to do with humans a lot. We get much closer with animals. So I'd always had ideas of like, oh, I'm not sure that's right. I don't think I like that. And there was a big moment when I was a kid and we'd gone camping and we could hear all of like the baby sheep, the lambs, obviously, bleating horribly as they were being taken into the van. And I'd asked my mum, what's that? What's happening there? And she'd tell me like, oh, don't look at it. They're just crying because they want their mums. And that really stuck with me. Like, these sheep are crying because they want their mums because we're stealing them. And it was only once I'd like looked more into it and really thought about things and decided like, I think this is something I want to do, that all of that started to click into place and form the whole picture of the puzzle, I suppose.
How old were you when this lamb incident happened?
Probably 7 or 8. Like I was very, very young, and I definitely didn't connect like they're being taken away. But my mum told me like, oh well, they're shouting for their mums. That gave them that like human element of like, oh well, I'd do that too.
Yeah. So then when you were getting older and you saw people caring about certain animals and saying it's okay to eat other ones, was that sort of difficult to understand?
Massively, and especially because I really liked animals, so my parents would take me to all these like petting farms and like various things like that. And there were so many times that I made the connection of like, oh, I'm feeding this lamb and eventually it's gonna be on someone's dinner table.
Yeah.
So I never ate lamb. That was never like something I was into. So I'd already formed that sort of bond, I suppose, very loosely, being someone that grew up in a city. I'd formed some degree of a bond with like, oh, well, I really like sheep and I really like pigs. And that definitely played on me. And then being autistic, you know, I've got so many cats and I've had snakes and I've had dogs. So I saw the way that people would like recoil from my snake. And I was like, oh, but she's a little cutie. And it's like, so you wouldn't ever eat that, or you wouldn't ever eat my cat. But this little sheep that I've just hand bottle fed and held like a baby, that's fine to go on your dinner.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You said you had snakes. I know when you look after a snake, they're carnivorous, right? How do you deal with that?
I ended up giving her away to a sanctuary because she started getting out all the time and it was a nightmare. But
oh wow,
I largely just had to do a massive disconnect. I had to buy the frozen mice, and I already felt terrible putting my money to that. And I had like barbecue tongs to make sure I was as far away from possible from the mouse. And then, you know, it's the life cycle, and I understand like both some animals need to eat meat, but I deal with it. I think I had it for like 3 years, and that was the absolute length of it for me. It broke my heart every time.
Yeah, I get that. I know when I think about carnivores in the wild, you know, this is just something I try not to think about because I just don't want to know.
Exactly. Like it's got to happen somewhere, but I don't want to have to be the one doing
it. Yeah, exactly. Are there any plant foods that you eat now that you would never have thought of trying before?
There's quite a few actually. I always have like a massive aversion to spinach. I think most people do. Like it's a slimy, horrible food, isn't it?
No, I love it.
I've got super into spinach. I put it in everything now. I think with most things, like there's a lot of fruit and veg that I either just had never tried or never ate because I knew what I liked. I had the things that I was comfortable with, and being vegan definitely took some things away from me that I felt I needed. And it was a little scary and a little out of my comfort zone at times. But for the most part, especially with a lot of like Asian and Indian dishes, there were things that I never ever would have tried. And like I eat spicy food now, which I never ever did. And not too spicy. I'm not hard, but I couldn't go on hot ones or anything. But you know, the odd like spicy bean burger or something that I can deal with now that I never would have tried before.
And are you still trying new things, or are you like you've got your safe meals now?
I mean, with all of the new vegan products that are coming out, I'm constantly trying new things. Like I tried the vegan Burger King chicken royale I tried last night, and that was impressive. That was real good. It still tastes like Burger King though, so I don't think I'd get it again. It's easier being vegan and then trying new things because I know that so many of them will be similar anyway. Like bacon's pretty much all the same if it's vegan, whereas it's all different when it's meat, but it's all pretty much the same when it's vegan. So I'll happily try like another brand or another type just because I know it's going to be pretty much what I expect.
Have you tried some of these like the Impossible Whopper or Beyond Meat?
I've tried a bunch of Beyond Meat because there's an amazing like vegan diner near my house, and they do one that tastes exactly like a Big Mac but better.
Oh yeah.
So all of that stuff, it does weird me out a little, but as long as we don't get like the little pieces of gristle in, I think I'll be okay. Once they make it, I think it's going to be like the whole issue of meat again.
They started including like blood, didn't they?
That's not for me. I don't And
Yeah.
like meat eaters are constantly reminded of the fact that it's an animal and they still go for it. I don't get that. Oh.
What are some vegan-friendly foods that you avoid now because of texture?
I still can't stand yogurt of any type. I don't see the appeal there. That's an odd texture. It is predominantly like liquidy things with lumps, and I don't really like soups an awful lot. That said, those scouts is still like the number one meal.
You mentioned Indian. Is curry okay?
Some of them. It depends how like liquidy it is. I predominantly make my own, so I can make it that bit more, it's got a sauce on it kind of thing, rather than a full liquid meal.
Okay.
A lot of vegan textures just aren't as bad as ones with dairy and milk in, because not as much can go wrong, I think. Like, it's so easy for like dairy to curdle or for meat to have a piece of gristle or whatever, whereas that just doesn't happen with the vegan stuff. So it's much easier with like, I never really ate stews or curries before I went vegan, and they're much easier now just because there's not going to be any weird, unexpected textures in there. What
about going out to eat? Has that changed?
Honestly, I think it made it easier at first, because obviously there's like a million vegan options in most places now, whereas when I first went vegan, it'd be like 2 or 3 options. So rather than having this whole giant menu, I'd go, oh, well, I can have one of these 3 things, and that's the only one that sounds good, so I'll get that. And that's another thing that a lot of autistic people find difficult, is when we've got too much choice. It's just, there's too much, I don't know what to do, I'm overwhelmed, and you just can't make a decision. So that made it a lot easier for me. And it's getting a little more difficult again now that we've got 1,000,001 vegan options. But I know what I like more.
It's the first time I've heard a negative about that. That's cool.
I'll take it, but it makes it a little harder.
Yeah. I remember maybe 10 years ago or so, I was in the Harvester trying to find something to eat that was vegan, and I got 3 sides. It was like garlic bread and chips and something.
Like the entire time I was in Turkey, it was just salad and chips.
Yeah, I've been vegetarian in Turkey. Even that was hard. I wasn't vegan at that time. But
I was vegetarian in France, and I remember like asking, could I have like a vegetarian dish with no meat? And they just bought me this giant plate of chicken and chips. And I was just like, oh man, so chicken's just not meat here.
There's a weird little subsection of people who really think chicken is okay or fish is okay. We got words for reasons, you know what I mean? So sort of day to day now, what does your diet look like?
Oh, not as good as it probably should.
That's all right.
I definitely eat a lot more vegetables and a lot more fruits. I think I've been forced to sort of learn more meals as well. There was a lot of things that I just didn't know how to cook. Like, I can make a really damn good vegan lasagna, but I had no idea how to make that before going vegan. So I've added a bunch of recipes to my little regime of them. Overall, it's just a lot healthier and it's a lot more diverse, because I was like very, very overweight before going vegan. And I think that's another topic that people are scared to cover with autistic people, because we don't go out as much as a lot of neurotypical people do. We don't form the same bonds that people do. So a lot of us are quite reluctant to get into sports and to do this and to do that. So there is, you know, I'm very body positive. No one needs to lose weight. But if you're overweight and you want to, I think that going vegan provides you with the forced change where you're changing your lifestyle anyway. So it's a lot easier to change it to a healthy lifestyle.
Especially if you go, like, I know you're into like your fake meats and stuff. I eat them, you know, I had them just now. But if you go whole food plant-based, that's like an all you can eat diet that you can still lose weight on. That's what I like to tell people. And
even with fake meat, it's so easy to, like, if you're going to do a lasagna, you just do half the mince that you'd normally do with like fake mince and half mushrooms or something. It's so easy to just mix it up and sort of sneak vegetables in there. I definitely eat double the amount of veg now than I did before.
I never thought you could just replace meat with like lentils or beans or something, but actually, you know what?
Every now and again, I'm okay with it. But like, I tried a rehydrated mince the other week, and that was the worst thing that's ever happened to my mouth. It was terrible.
So like the textured vegetable protein stuff, is it?
It was very misshaped mushroom kind of texture. It was very hard.
I think it's okay if it's like a mince, if you're replacing mince.
Yeah. It's easy.
I don't know. Maybe I get different brands to you though.
Probably. It's easy to replace a lot of different meat products with veg if you have just the thought of it, really, I think. And that's where it's really handy having so many vegan blogs and YouTubers and stuff, because a lot of the time I just won't think to do something. I would have never thought like, hey, I can just replace some mince with mushrooms and make this a healthier dish. Yeah. Just never would have considered it.
Yeah, we're really lucky because we're kind of young, right? So we've got the internet right there. Imagine going vegan like 20 years ago.
People actually did as well. That's what blows my mind. Like, people have been vegan for so long, and suddenly it's this like, oh, veganism's a trend. Since when? Like, since 100 years ago.
Yeah, right. They had to go to health food shops for their milk, for their soy milk. I'm really, really grateful.
Very much so. They paved the way.
So some people say that autism can affect empathy. Is that true?
Definitely. The main reason that a lot of people like to call autism a spectrum is because it is very much like you've got all these different sliders, and some people's are very high and some people's are very low. A lot of people describe it more as like a recording board, like a music recording board with all these different knobs and sliders. And
I can see that.
Place. So some people will have like less empathy than perhaps a general neurotypical person does. But a lot of autistic people actually have hyper empathy, and they're very, very empathetic, which is really unexpected to a lot of people, and a really sort of crappy stereotype that's been put out there that we just don't feel anything.
Yeah.
And I largely think it comes because a lot of us don't show an awful lot of emotion on our face. So we could be like crying and really upset or angry or whatever inside, but we just don't show it, so people assume it's not there.
Wow, really? I didn't realize that.
There's a whole word for it, but I don't remember what it is.
That's all right. And your personal empathy slider, where is that? Is that okay? Is that polite to ask?
I'd say that's quite a nice way of asking.
Sorry, okay.
I'd say mine's pretty high, especially when it comes to a lot of us, I think, have said online and things from what I've read, that our empathy level's a lot higher for like the general world than it is perhaps for like if a friend comes to us with an issue. Like, we'll still feel bad for them.
Okay.
But like, if I had my best friend crying to me about an issue, I'd feel horrible for her. I'd do my best to comfort her, but I wouldn't cry with her. Whereas I can read something on the news and just be sat there bawling because these people 1,000 miles away have been affected in this horrible way. So it varies on both where your empathy levels are and what they're aimed towards, I think.
And do you think that for you, that affected your decision to go vegan?
Definitely. A lot of people with autism also, we get our special interests and we get our hyper focus. So I had a whole special interest with the Beatles. So obviously once you get into like Paul McCartney, he's very into the vegetarianism, and that all tied in for me. So I'd then use my special interests to sort of push myself to go more outside of my comfort zone to find out about more things. And once you've done that and you find out like, oh, well, there's these pigs 100 miles away that are going to have this happen to them, and there's these dogs 100,000 miles away that'll have this happen to them, it immediately just touched me. I was like, oh no, I've got to save them all. And the easiest way to do that is to not eat them.
Yeah, absolutely. A strong need for routine is often associated with autism. Is that correct for you?
I absolutely thrive from having a routine. It's the expected versus unexpected. It's just nice to know what's coming next all the time.
Prevents anxiety?
Yeah, massively.
Okay. And this need for routine, did that affect your transition at all?
There were some times when I felt it was somewhere between anxiety and sadness, because on the one side you've got like, oh, well, I'm used to having a Sunday roast with like my roast beef and the Yorkshire puddings and having this. And I'd always go to my mum's for that. And suddenly, oh, I'm just going to have to go to my mum's. I'm going to have to like not eat what everyone else is eating. It just breaks the routine a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky. And when I told my mum, like, I'm worried about this, she was like, well, I'll get you some baked meeting to do on it. Why are you panicking? But all of that, like, it's once your routine's broken, you just panic and it's just what's coming next. And I think I definitely had a little bit of that with going vegan. But we're also quite known for being very determined and stubborn. So once I'd made my mind up of like, this is the right thing and this is what I need to do, it was very much just like, well, that's what I'm going to do, then that's what needs to happen.
Okay. And because we have these 1-for-1 swaps now, you swapped your meat roast for a vegan roast. Did that make it easier?
1,000 times easier. I think one of the main reasons that I always failed at my attempts to go vegan was because I wasn't doing that. It was just way too much change too quickly. It's much easier, especially for autistic people, and I think neurotypicals as well, when going vegan, to just slowly incorporate things and figure out what's right for you and what isn't. And I never did that. I was always just like, yes, this aubergine is now a steak. And that's just not going to work. It's just not.
I think I get that. Like you said, you were watching vegan YouTubers and stuff, and this is what I do all the time. And we're telling people like, you need to stop hurting animals now. You know what I mean? We're not telling people, okay, take a few weeks, take a month transition, even though that might actually be better advice because you're more likely to stick with it less likely to give up straight away? I don't know what the psychology is yet, but maybe there's something in there.
I think it just varies so much from person to person. Like, I was very much the type where Freely the Banana Girl screaming about how, like, you're killing the planet, you're killing animals, and you're doing this. That was what people like, oh crap, am I? But I think every person needs a different push to go vegan, really. Like, my boyfriend went vegan like 3 years into me being vegan because he had seen by that point, like, oh, she can do this and she can eat this and she can go here. And that was the push that he needed. Like, he'd seen all the videos with me. He'd watched multiple, like, Cowspiracy and all sorts with me and just not cared.
What was his reason for going vegan?
He claims health, but then he's cried at a few documentaries since going vegan. So I think it is somewhat for the animals. But he's also autistic. So I think that's quite a clear indicator that some of us are very, very different, because it took him 3 years of seeing me doing it and watching the documentaries to finally pick it up. And it took me about 3 months, I think.
So what was happening? You're cooking separate meals for the first 3 years?
No, I just made him eat my vegan meals. It was what I cooked. He'd go to work or he'd go out to eat and he'd go and see his mum, and that was when he'd just have all the stuff he normally had. Okay,
that's a good way to do it, though. He got to see like exactly what he could be eating.
Like he was probably about 70% vegan for most of that time, just because he didn't have much of a choice. And there were a few times he thought he was going to be clever and buy his own meat, and he'd be stood there cooking bacon while I was just sat here like gagging over the smell. So it wasn't going to work like that.
It's funny how that changes, isn't it? When you used to eat bacon, was the smell nice?
I loved the smell of bacon. I smelled most meat cooking, and now when I smell it, it is very much that connection of like, that's just a corpse being roasted. It's odd how that changes. And like he's almost
absolutely, I gag too.
He's almost a year in, and it's only recently when we've been like out and about, he's caught a whiff of meat from somewhere and be like, oh, that smells vile. Whereas a few months ago he would have been like, oh, smell that.
The worst maybe is when you're scrolling through a website and you see a picture of a meat dish and everyone's on there, oh, this looks delicious, but you've seen it and you haven't seen the food. You've literally seen a body part. It doesn't even cross your mind that that's food.
I don't find that so much like burgers and hot dogs, but when you see like the full roast chicken or the full pig and stuff like that, I'm like, how are you eating that? Like, I don't.
The full pig is the craziest. They keep everything.
It's insane.
I can't believe it. So with so much knowledge now on what happens to animals, what eating them is doing to us and to the planet, and pandemics and that kind of thing, why do you think so many people are still not vegan?
I think there's a bunch of different reasons. Like, just from the people that I know, some of it's definitely masculinity. Like, even since my boyfriend's gone vegan, he's been torn to shreds in the office over it by other fellas. And I think some of it's just that it's so, I'm a man and I like football and pork pies. And that just, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there for a million other reasons. And that's definitely one reason. I think some of it's the comfort. Like, it's just very easy, isn't it? It's very easy to just put a blocker on and just, well, I'm eating my burger. I didn't murder the animal, so it's not on me. I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
And it's also just, people are so desensitized to it. It's everywhere. It's everywhere all the time. You see raw meat in adverts and it's meant to look nice in some way, even though it's just a slab of flesh.
Yes.
You know, it's constantly pushed on us that like, this is nice, this is good, this is healthy, it's part of your daily food pyramid and you need meat and dairy. It's, especially for people like probably over the age of 40, it's what you do, it's how you survive, it's the right thing. And more of us are figuring out what it isn't, but it's very ingrained in a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's the main reason, in my opinion. But how do we get people to break through that and just sort of step aside and look back in, see what's really going on?
My view is very much like soft education. That's what I'm trying to do. I don't think it's necessarily the best way, or definitely not the only way, but I very much see it as, if I talk about my experiences and how I've seen it as a positive, and just slowly and nicely sort of levy people into like, here's something better. I think that's a great way to go about it. But like I say, some people, like, you just need to go at them and tell them you're doing something wrong. Wake up. And that's what some people need. And as more and more people make videos and blog posts and everything else about veganism, we're going to see all of the different approaches. I think there'll be something out there for everyone eventually to switch.
Exactly. It's exactly like you said, you know, different people react to different things. Like, I needed to be shouted at and told I'm an animal abuser to go. I was vegetarian for a long time and then I went vegan and I was told you're still an animal abuser. And I didn't fight. I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. But not everyone reacts like that, to be fair. So yeah, we need approaches like yours too. Absolutely.
I think there's a very big difference between sort of putting it out there and addressing it as like, here's a YouTube video or a blog post or a tweet saying you're abusing animals if you're eating meat, versus commenting on like someone's post. I would never ever do that. I don't ever want to say it's something I disagree with, but it's not something I'd ever do. I don't agree with a personal approach. I think the education should be there for people that want it and easily approachable. And if it slides into like someone's subscription box or something and they click on it by accident and then they're converted, that's fine too. But I don't think it's right to aim it at people, really.
I would like to see some science done, some psychology work done to see how do people react to these things. And then we would finally know what's the best thing. I feel like right now we're just trying many different approaches between us all. But it'd be cool if we knew. What's your advice to someone who wants to go vegan but has similar obstacles to you?
I think it's better to take it slow. It might not be every vegan's opinion, but take it slow. Figure out the right and wrong things for you. Figure out what works. If you're having a really tough day and your comfort food's like mac and cheese or something, maybe give a vegan one a go. And if that really doesn't work, then have the one that actually makes you feel better. But just try everything and see what is available that will be useful to you. And obviously don't give up. Like, you're doing the best thing for the health and the planet and the animals and everything else. So just keep going at it until it does work, because it will. I absolutely think it will for everyone eventually, provided they don't have like any dietary full issues or allergies or whatever else. Like, obviously some disabilities you just won't be able to go vegan with them. That's just the fact of things. But I'd say probably like a solid 98.9% of the population could and should go vegan.
And I think, like you said with the mac and cheese example, then, like if you still need to do that for now, you're still trying to work that one out, you can do everything else while you're working that one out, Okay, then. So just before we go, I know you have a YouTube channel and I really want the listeners to check it out. So could you give us your best sales pitch?
Ooh. I make videos focusing around educating people about autism, a little bit on veganism, a little bit on fashion, and a little bit on vintage stuff as well. My main goal is to just educate people and also provide people with relatability and normalizing just being who you are, being happy with who you are, and having a good time, pretty much. I'm trying to just be the best version of myself and inspire everyone else to be the best version of themselves.
If you want to support Dana, I highly recommend her channel. If you're on YouTube, you'll find it linked down below. And if you're listening elsewhere, you'll need to search for Dana Andersen. That's D-A-N-A. And then Andersen is A-N-D-E-R-S-E-N. Okay, that's an E. She can also be found on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or at carryonbeautiful.com. I would like to give a huge thank you to all of my patrons for supporting the production of these podcasts. That's Ekaterina Maranova, Matthew D, Sleeps8, Mark Henderson, Ash Q, and Kathy Lawrence. If you want to get your name added to that list, you can support me too by clicking the link in the description on YouTube or by searching Patreon for Peace with Rhys. That's peace like a hippie might say it, and R-H-Y-S for the name Rhys. Now remember to subscribe, and I'll see you later. Thanks for listening.